and welcome to the Mindset Michelle TV show. We're so super excited to have you joining us today for yet another fabulous and amazing episode. And today's extra special guest is the lovely Riley Jarvis. Hello, Riley.
Hi, Michelle.
It's so lovely having you on the show, and I'm really fascinated. And for those of you that haven't heard of Riley and his company, The Sleep Consultant, I'm fascinated to hear more about how to become a specialist in sleep. Now, this isn't like going into a bedding shop and actually picking out a mattress. This is somebody that can help you with your sleeping patterns and your habits. And I also am fascinated with this idea that you're a bio copywriter. So you seem to be an expert, and from what I've read about you, you are an expert and you know quite a lot in this biotech and biohacking space. So Riley, let's start with the sleep consultant part. How on earth do you become a sleep consultant, and what is it that makes you passionate about it?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. And, it's interesting with us health type coaches, how we got into it is really not, is through our own personal journey and through our own struggles where, we came through our own transformation to where we're now helping other people. And, for me, it was no different. I started out in finance, 10 years ago. I'm in my early 30s now. And I was a high achiever before going to university. I went to school for business finance, getting good grades. Life was good, good social life and everything like that. Once I graduated, I went into investment banking and private equity space. Now, the hours within this field are pretty strenuous. Sometimes it's a dog-eat-dog world, where there's 5 to 10 people willing to take your place if your performance is subpar. So you really have to be on your A game like all the time. And of course it's stressful, but when you're that age, I mean, you kind of get not a high off the competition, or, you just really like getting into that flow. And that's, I felt like I was performing on all pistons at the time, but, within 6 months of being at that job, things started to go downhill for me. The first was I started making really clumsy mistakes at work, just being very forgetful. And I didn't know why. Like, I thought I was sleeping okay the night before, but things started to deteriorate and I started gaining weight where places I shouldn't have. It was really weird. I was gaining weight, I was losing weight, even though I was, eating about the same. And after that, I was, just getting brain fog. The list just went on and on. So I started going to different doctors. I probably saw 24 specialists in the process, and turns out I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Now, my performance at my job just became so subpar, at least at that level compared to, where you had to be. I was forced to quit my job, and I was forced to, kind of go into bed. And I started to feel worse and worse. And it was sort of at this point, so I was bedridden. I really didn't have energy to go outside anymore. I kind of fell into this. It was kind of a dark time in my life. I fell into a depression, side effects from medication that they were giving me for the Crohn's disease. And Crohn's disease, for anybody that doesn't know, is kind of inflammatory disease, specifically with your stomach and your intestines and everything. But it's sort of autoimmune in nature, meaning it can, compromise your entire immune system. And it can cause you to feel fatigue and all these things. And the diagnosis was good to hear, because it was like, okay, it's this thing, this is what I'm dealing with. But it also was a shock at the same time, thinking I'm going to have this thing for the rest of my life. And of course, there's a range where sometimes, people can be lethal for some, very small percentage. And then you have the other end of the range where people just don't feel it all and they go on with it. I was probably somewhere, in the middle where it was impacting me more than the average person. But yeah, I was at that point, was sort of bedridden. Side effects from medication were actually making me feel worse, were making me gain more weight, more of that brain fog. And I just realized, you know what, I have to take health into my own hands. And it was at this point where, I had all this time on my hands. I graduated, I wasn't working at the time, kind of going more and more into debt. And so taking health into my own hands and really just researching, studying hours upon hours a day, scientific studies, masterminding with other people, understanding how does our biology work on a first principles level? How do our hormones work? How does our brain work? How do our thyroid gland, all of our organs communicating with each other, our circadian rhythm, all the different systems that we have in our body? How do the cells, our gut bacteria, inflammation inside of the body, how does that impact the gut-brain axis, the gut-brain barrier, and all these different things? And kind of combining this all together while masterminding with people, spending so much money on private doctors. I mean, the list just went on and on. I started to sort of formulate this idea about how the body works, not just what people told me, and I just took it at face value, but to really understand myself. And I would try, so I would start working on my health one sort of section at a time. So the first month I would go into exercise 1 month, and then I would go into food 1 month, and then I'd go into sleep 1 month. And when I got to that sleep month, I was tracking my sleep, I was improving sleep, getting to bed earlier, trying to sleep longer. I noticed everything started to improve and go in the right direction. And I wasn't on any medication at this time. I just decided it was time to go off, because I did hear recovery stories of people being able to do this naturally. And it was at that point that, stuff started really going in the right direction. I started getting the weight back. My brain fog went away. And fast forward a couple of years later, my Crohn's disease went into 100% complete remission. Conventional doctors weren't really sure why. And then I was able to even go past to feeling better than I even did before. So I was like, wow, I am really onto something. There's really something to the sleep. And of course, exercise and diet probably really facilitated that. But sleep was that really one thing I noticed. I'm giving my body the right inputs. It's suddenly giving me the right outputs. And everything is just, it has its own innate healing mechanism. I was probably always getting in its own way. I was stressed all the time. I was eating bad foods and just living a really stressful diet, burning the candle from both ends and just digging myself deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole. And so it was, through sleep, when I was able to do that for myself, I told my friends, they caught wind of it. And then it was just, helping them with their sleep, and not through the lens of a disease state like I was sort of in, but more so just functionally, everybody day to day being able to get more energy, get more focus, get more, concentration, being able to work longer throughout the day and not have those energy crashes, have better relationships, more stress resilience, maybe lose more weight or gain more muscle, whatever really your goals were. And it was at the point that, they started getting results. They told their friends, and just sort of made a local name for myself. And then once I just started seeing their results, it just organically grew. And I thought, I could probably turn this into an actual business and help people around the world. So it was at that point that I started, taking the business virtually internationally, where the sleep consultant name came to be. And, sort of since then, it's just been helping people around the world with their sleep. I typically, everybody needs better sleep, and, we can't get away from it. But I specifically work with a lot of the higher performer types. So like athletes, high level executives, C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, where they're really looking to optimize every single part of the day. They may be tracking their numbers, they may be tracking their blood results, and we're really looking to take them from like a 7 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 up to 10 out of 10, because for them, every single hour counts. But I work with other people too, even though it's a smaller portion, just regular people with their sleep, and they're obviously easier clients to work with compared to people where we're trying to fine tune everything. But it's amazing when you start to improve your sleep, everything else improves throughout your life. And I usually call them the three amigos. We have better sleep.
So just before, I just was thinking, it's funny when talking to people from North America, it's like, I start to feel like, is he going to take a breath? It's wonderful, amazing story, Riley. But I was starting to think, maybe I should say, please breathe, please breathe.
Yeah, I talk pretty fast sometimes.
You do, and like I said, it's a very North American trait. And also, it's lovely hearing the story, but I was literally starting to get quite anxious that you were talking for a very long time. So let's just reflect a little bit on what you've shared so far. So what an interesting journey, and not that one that's that unusual for a younger person to finish uni or finish college and join the workforce in those formative years, to just kind of burn the candle at every end. And unfortunately, sometimes, like with yourself, that can lead to symptoms of burnout, and in your case, to the Crohn's disease. It's also fascinating that in some of these stories, like with yourself, that challenging time at that age then set up the opportunity for you to learn. And as you were talking about how you experimented with food, with exercise, with sleep, that then helped you to have much more of that body awareness and self-awareness around what works for you and how your body ticks. And I have seen other times, which is fabulous, this same kind of idea that people have experimented in different areas of their lives, but It was actually when they came to the sleep side of things, and we can get into some of the elements around the restorative effects on the body, and the time out and the pausing, and you're obviously not on a device while you're asleep as well. With all of that journey, and it's that there is the theme there of, you know, working at the high end and working with people that have an incredibly meticulous, whether it was in the finance world or with the sporting and elite people you're working with now, working with people that have that meticulous attention to detail. And like you were describing with yourself, they are tracking the numbers, they are tracking this, they're tracking that, because it's fine-tuning different elements in their lives.
Absolutely.
Before we get into all of that, though, one of the things I'm fascinated about with somebody that is such an incredible high achiever like yourself, and also somebody that has mastered in an area that not that many, like I said at the beginning, I don't know many other sleep health specialists or health coaches that specialize in sleep. So what is your view, and how do you then look at success? What do you define as success for yourself nowadays, having been so meticulous in observing and understanding yourself and gone on that journey, and now refining your own journey, I'm sure, whilst you're supporting these high-level elite athletes and others? What then do you define as success?
Yeah, that's another really great question. You know, you're right. Just going through my own personal health journey and then working with other people, you just start to see the same patterns again and again and again. And I have to say, for myself in my young mind, you know, to me, success was external, making more money, you know, getting success, achievement, traveling, getting more, all these materialistic things. And I think, you know, God, the universe, or whatever it was, really gave me a lesson, because it sort of shot me the other way. And it made me, you know, it was kind of a death to the ego in a way at the time, you know, just hitting that rock bottom with Crohn's. And like, no matter how hard I tried, no matter the harder I would push, the deeper I would dig myself into that rabbit hole. And then I, you know, the lesson came to me where I had to prioritize myself first and focus on the inside first, and then the external will follow, opposed to focusing on the external first and sacrificing the internal. And then all of a sudden, you know, everything comes crashing down at once. And I've just seen it again and again with so many people that I work with. And, you know, for some people, it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, even 30 years sometimes, just depending on what their bodies can actually handle. But for me, I think that for me, what success is, it's not so much the materialistic things. For me, it's being able to, more so on a personal level, helping out as many people as I can with their own health and their own success, specifically through the realm of sleep, because I've just seen how powerful sleep can be. And we can go into some of those examples. But just when you focus on the internal first and you prioritize your health, to me, that is what success is. Because when you have that in place, I mean, they say health is wealth, as cliche as that sounds. But when you focus on that, all those external things that you want to do anyway are probably going to happen, because the version of yourself is just much higher, where you're just, you know, you're just living a much more effortless experience, where you do have more energy, where you're, you know, you're just a better person to be around. And as a result, maybe you can make more money in your business, because that, opposed to trying to chase all these things, when you're in the state of being and focusing on your health, you just seem to attract that anyway. And it's just one thing that I've noticed. And so, you know, for me, that's ultimately what success is. If, you know, balance is definitely a great word, but to really just focus on all these attributes, not just drill down into one thing. Obviously, we're going to have periods where we have to immerse ourselves and to go into these acute stages of stress, lots of coffee, whatever. But instead of, we take the principle of, you know, just focusing on our health, living a more balanced, holistic lifestyle, then, you know, to me, I think that's ultimately what success is. And especially for the long term, when we think about longevity.
And I really love that. And thank you, because you bring up a really lovely point around, you know, especially when we're talking about younger people, and that external focus on success being money, cars, this, that, all of those things. And then it can be difficult to go through some of these challenges, but the challenges, and even COVID recently, you know, people talk about the great resignation, the great this, the great that over this period of time. But these are kind of the wake-up calls for people to focus more on the inner. And I love how you then can see, well, this focusing on the inner then creates more success in all of the outer, because you focused on your health. You've spent that time becoming aware of your body and your sleeping patterns and your habits. And so that definition of success, and that's really a lovely way of putting it, becomes the success of understanding what is going on inside of you and what your sleeping is happening and what your this is happening and that is happening. And it's so true. In my world, you know, it's people meditating and doing those kinds of reflective practices is what we would call them. But in your world, I'm fascinated, and that's why I'm sure the audience wants to hear some more about some of these suggestions for how to create better sleep, how to become more observant. When you were focusing on sleep as the one of those ingredients, like a cake mix, sleep is one of those ingredients in that health mix to then create a healthier, happier, more successful mindset and life. What were some of the suggestions you have for people as to what they can do to kind of experiment and fine-tune their sleep?
Absolutely. You know, one thing when it comes to your sleep is you just need a taste of what it feels like, because let's just say you're living in an existence where you just don't have a lot of positive feelings. Maybe it's just because you're stressed out. Maybe you just really have no free time to yourself, where it's just, you know, you're working, you know, probably for some people it's 8 to 12 hours. After that, they come home, they have to make dinner, they have the kids. They really just have no time for themselves. And maybe it's sitting down, watching Netflix, maybe having a glass of wine or some beer, and that's their form of relaxation. By the time they go to bed, their body never fully restored while they do sleep. And when they wake up, you know, it's just sort of that cycle again. And because they feel tired, they need to go for more coffee, which is, you know, or any other stimulant. And then that cycle repeats itself over the days, months, and years. So I think the very first step with any of this, you said the word is awareness, is because when we have better body awareness and our mind awareness of what our body actually needs. And I used to think back in the day that this was something that we can just look past, like what is awareness? But it's very interesting with it, because when we can become aware of what our body actually needs, it's almost as if we have all these tools in our tool belt, and we know when we wake up that we can just use this specific tool at the specific time that our body needs the most. And once you have that match, it's like you're going to have the best day ever, or you're going to have the best sleep ever. But when you don't have that internal awareness of what your body actually needs, for example, is it more stress you find that's happening inside of your mind, or is it more stress that's inside of your body? Is it stress that, you know, does it feel it's related to, like, what part of your body is it in? Is it feels like it's more of a hormone thing, you know, with your cortisol, adrenaline, or does it feel like you have too much coffee? Whatever that sort of looks like. So anyway, that's just high level, simple terms, what awareness is. And so once you have that awareness, I would suggest getting some form of a sleep tracker, and a sleep tracker can really help you with all of that. And so different forms of sleep trackers, there's a few on the market. You know, the Apple Watch is a really great one. My favorite one I'm wearing right now is called an Oura Ring. They're specific to sleep. The other one is called the Whoop Band. There's the Fitbit. Those are probably the main ones on the market today. But those ones are incredible, because really when we sleep, we don't know how we feel unless, you know, we wake up in the middle of the night, or we wake up, you know, in the morning and we see like, oh, I don't feel that great today, but we don't know why did we not sleep well. Is it because we didn't get proper REM sleep? We didn't get proper deep sleep? Was our resting heart rate too high where we weren't fully recovered? How about our body temperature? How about our breathing and all these other things? But we can actually track this stuff on a spreadsheet, and we can see the trends over days, months, and years. And we can correlate that with, were we eating a healthy diet? Did we have low sugar? Were we hydrated? Were we exercising properly? Did we sort of avoid blue light closer to bedtime? And did we, you know, try and get as much sun throughout the day? And so we can isolate these variables and really become a scientist in our own lives. And I think, you know, you spend a couple $100s on some of these devices and you'll have it for years. And you can even see the history of this data. And it's really cool to look back in time sometimes. Maybe you go on a vacation, you see your heart rate variability improve, and just these other things. So it's very interesting. So that's kind of one gadget to help you with the awareness. Once you have sort of that mindset piece down,
let's just unpack, because again, it's wonderful. You have so much incredible insights and value in some of the things that I think for yourself are just, oh yeah, this, that. But let's just unpack that a little bit. That mind-body awareness, I think that is a really important starting point. And I love how you talked about some of the different devices. So I have a Fitbit which actually tracks my sleeping, food, movement, exercise, all of that. So the tools are actually available much more now for people to become more of those scientists around their body. But the key thing that I think you were talking about to start with there was about becoming aware of what your body needs and using these tools. So they're just tools, but the point of those tools is to become more aware. I think of it sometimes as being like a car. And if you need oil, the red light comes on. So the technology isn't quite there yet, but there will come a time where, you know, if you need water, you get an alert that says you need water, if you need salt, if you need this, if you need that. So the technology is going down that path that people can start now with that kind of scientific observing around these different elements. And you very quickly talked about, and I'm fascinated with this myself because, as I said, I'm tracking things. REM sleep, deep sleep, all these different types of sleep. So is there a scientific or, you know, specific, I guess part of why I'm asking this question is people I know belong to like the 5 a.m. club and exist on 4 hours sleep. But there must be some scientific background to, you know, the body needs at least this amount of sleep. It needs to be in REM sleep for this amount of time.
Yeah.
As part of that, being body aware and tracking, which is part of what you're talking about, what would you suggest around even just those two areas, the amount of time to sleep and also tracking how long you're in those different stages? Is there a specific range to kind of aim for?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so generally on a high level, we want to give anywhere between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. And they show, you know, this is the average for most people. Some people can get away with 6, sometimes people need more than 9. Those are the outliers. But between, you know, 7 and 9 seems to be the sweet spot, is what the science shows. And our sleep goes in 90-minute sleep cycles. And so that means, you know, our sleep cycles will go 90 minutes. It'll go 3 hours, 4.5 hours, 6 hours, and then 7.5 hours. Now, when it comes to sleep, we usually talk about we want to get 8 hours of sleep. Now, that's good, but the only issue I have with that is if we wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle, meaning where it's kind of this really deep wave sleep, it can actually cause us to wake up feeling groggy. And so what's more optimal, this isn't time in bed, this is time we're actually sleeping. If we can wake up the end of that 90-minute sleep cycle, so for example, 7.5 hours or 6 hours, we can feel better than that 8 hours of sleep, or we can go towards the 9 hours, you know, really just whatever we have time for. People know their body best. That's a really good way to kind of gauge it there. Now, what's really interesting with everybody's body, we kind of touched on it a little bit, is about each person's individuality. And, you know, genetically, we're not all part, you know, genetically the 5 a.m. club, you know, and this is another thing with sleep in the cultures. We usually like to wear, you know, sleep is sort of a badge of honor where sleeping less is better in order to get ahead, especially in the finance world where I came from. You know, if we were to prioritize sleep over getting done the work, I mean, you would be out the door tomorrow morning. So it's one thing where you have to really, you know, really keep in mind to see, you know, what works best for you and what works best for your schedule. And so what's really interesting is I run a lot of genetic tests on my clients. And what we can see is, are they a morning person or are they a nighttime person? Now, 70% of the population is a nighttime person, also known as a night owl. 30% is a morning lark, meaning they're a morning person. It gets a little bit more complex, but this is in simple terms. And so what that means is if 70%, the majority of the population, are nighttime, and our environment is, especially the work environment, was more conducive to the morning, now all of a sudden we have this mismatch between what someone's genetically needs for sleep and what, you know, they're actually getting throughout their life in the morning. Now, a lot of people swear that they're a morning person just because they've been following a morning schedule for years, sometimes decades. They're like, yeah, I've always been a morning person. But it's very interesting when we run the genetic test and we actually see they're a nighttime person. Then what we do is we start switching their morning. So, you know, it's about 2 hours later, we kind of get that match going with the night owl. Their productivity can sometimes shoot through the roof by like 20, 30, 40% sometimes, just because we have that match that's in place. And, you know, people are just so used to their old form normal, but now they get a taste of what it feels like. And they look back, they're like, wow, I'm surprised I've never done that before. So here's another example of awareness when we can really get that match going. And so, you know, you can do a lot of genetic testing and different forms of testing on yourself. And so that's where things are very interesting too. But you can also find out this sort of known as your chronotype. You can go to the powerofwhenquiz.com. And it's just a simple questionnaire that people can go to. Probably takes you about 10 minutes, and it'll separate. There's 4 different animals. It's called your sleep animal sign. It's by this doctor named Dr. Bruce. You're either a dolphin, you're a lion, you're a wolf, or you're a bear. And based on those, it kind of breaks it down just generally. I like to genetic test the most because it's a lot more concrete and factual, but that's just another good way to do it. So once you sort of have that match in place, then after that you can do is, there's other basic things you can do with sleeping in a cool
just
bedroom.
To reflect on that as well, because that's again some really powerful insights that you're sharing, and wow, my mind's just going, I want to go and do the Power of When quiz now. I want to find out if I'm a cuddly bear or a wild, one of the other wild animals. But just to quickly recap, because these are quite powerful suggestions you're making. The sweet spot and the range is between 7 to 9 hours and about 8 hours for most people. The other really good part that you talked about and mentioned is the quality. So the 90-minute rhythms and cycles. So thank you for pointing out why even if you have 9 hours sleep, you could still wake up groggy because, that the sleep circadian rhythms that your body was going through, you had in that 9 hours over an hour that you were actually waking up. So those 90-minute cycles and how important they are. And finally, what I want to keep saying, hallelujah, somebody else that is talking about being a morning or a night person, and 70% being a night person is actually a very, very high percentage, but that reflects some of what I've experienced when working with health with clients as well, that, it's kind of a square peg in a round hole. And so playing those roles where you're fitting in because everybody else is in the office at 8 a.m. and they stay there till 6 p.m. and so on and so forth. And then you go home and get your second wind about 10 p.m. And so you're living on that 5-6 hours sleep because you're more alert and awake and productive. So I love that working out whether you're a morning or a night person and then changing your hours. And that's where it's interesting as work is shifting to being more hybrid and working from home. People are being given more of the opportunity around, well, what is your sweet spot? Because it's about the outcomes as opposed to sitting in an office at 8 hours now. And we could, there's so many, I feel like I could talk to you for 3 or 4 hours or a 9-hour sleep cycle just to keep unpacking some of these incredible insights that you were sharing with everybody. But how can people get hold of you? But what's the best way to connect with you and find out more information?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pretty simple. They can go to thesleepconsultant.com, sleepconsultant.com. On there, they can join the weekly newsletter. That's probably the thing where you can get, I'm shooting 3 emails a week where you can just learn stuff about sleep. I'm talking about this stuff, but in a lot more detail. I'm really starting to ramp up my YouTube channel now. That's kind of the next big thing in the pipeline. So you'll be getting a lot of cool and quick lessons in there on your way to work and whatnot. But I also offer a free 10-minute sleep consultant with me personally, where we can, evaluate your bedroom environment and anything else like that if you want something a little bit more personalized. But there's blogs on there. You can find me on social media, just put in Riley Jarvis. And that's everything's inside of there.
Fabulous. And Riley, if you were to give some advice to your younger self, and given, there's always good and bad with some of life's challenges. And I think that you were quite lucky to learn that quite early on in your life and in your career. But what type of advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, it's a really good one too. And it's one that I pondered a lot on. And I, came back to the simple wisdom of not being, I think, so hard on myself. I was doing like my absolute best, but at the same time was just so hard on myself. And, that thought created a negative chemical reaction in my body, which decreased my health even more at the time. So I think looking back, I would have said, just be more easy on yourself. Good things are going to happen. It's going to become inevitable. There's this really good wisdom that this mentor gave me that kind of helped me through some of the mindset stuff as I was going through this. His name is Daniel Hill, and I work with him with some of my clients sometimes. But he says, so you want to be first, you be, get, want. And when you become the thing, you get the thing, and then you want the thing, versus I had it the other way around. I was want, then get, and then be was sort of the last thing. And so when I saw it in those simple terms, that really helped me. And other people I've sort of shared that with as well, just that sort of mindset shift. But that was one thing. If I could go back and do it again, it would just be easier on yourself. Everything is going to work out. You don't have to stress out so much. And really looking back, like, as much as it was a blessing in disguise, and it was all for what it is today. So I probably wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that. And I do have to say, it's way more impactful now, helping people and transforming their lives instead of looking at a finance spreadsheet all day. So
what a wonderful, wonderful way to end. And I really love that the advice to your younger self about being kinder to yourself and think your kinder thoughts. And especially, when things are a little bit tougher, work-wise or life-wise, people may have a tendency to be a bit harder on themselves. So whatever age, having that advice around being kinder to yourself and trusting in the process as well, because what an amazing journey you've had, Riley. Thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing these incredible insights.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me on. It was an honor.
Fabulous. And to everybody watching, I hope that you've been as fascinated as I have with these incredible insights from this wonderful specialist, Riley, about sleep. And until next time, for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.